Welcome back to From the Cheap Seats. I am your host, Charlie Jimenez, and join me as in my NFL analyst, Max Tomlinson, as we recap the Super Bowl and create our own NFL mock draft of the first round. So, Super Bowl 59 going into it, everybody thought it was going to be a heavyweight bout, Chiefs, Eagles, but instead it turned out being the Eagles had a meticulous plan that they executed to perfection, while the Chiefs, the other fighter, couldn't dodge a single punch. They're getting punched in the face. The Eagles came out early, swinging and dissing out haymakers. By half, it was a 24-0 lead. We saw the Chiefs, by the end of the fourth quarter, they were wobbling around like a guy who swears he can take another shot at the bar. Overall, Mahomes, the Chiefs' offensive line couldn't hold up at all. The Eagles' defense was very, very determined to get after him. He got sacked a career high 6 times. That's including the regular season and playoffs. And he was just running for his life like he owed someone money. And so, Max, what do you think of the Super Bowl?
I thought it was a great game. It was very entertaining to watch. Went about the best way I could have hoped for. We see a total beatdown on the Chiefs, which Chargers fans. So, but from a game perspective, it was cool to see Saquon finally get that ring that everyone would agree that he deserves. It was really cool to see him go off in that game. I was wrong go with my predictions. I was fully going into that game not expecting any much from Jalen Hurts passing wise. Boy, was I corrected. I should never underestimate A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, but it was a great game. Like you were talking about, Eagles defense really came after Mahomes. It was amazing to see Jalen Carter slap Mahomes 2 hands to the face on a play with a forced fumble. And, it was just a very, very entertaining game. And I can't say much except the fact that I'm just pleased with the way it went.
Earlier on, I talked about this on my first Gray Room episode in my Super Bowl recap. I got Broncos versus Seahawks vibes from the Super Bowl back in 2013, 2014. If you didn't know, the Seahawks beat the Broncos 43-8, and it was Peyton Manning with the best passing offense possibly of all time versus that Seattle Seahawks Legion of Boom. Early on, you had the Eagles. They went out and scored, and after that first down, you didn't see the Chiefs get anything going. Then they throw a pick six that reminded me so much of what the Legion of Boom did to the Denver Broncos offense. I think the Eagles secondary, they did a fantastic job at shutting down the intermediate passes that the Chiefs were really good at in the regular season. They made it clear early on they were not going to give that up. We saw later only when the Chiefs started to try the deep ball, it actually kind of started to work. The Chiefs' offensive line, they did not perform up to normal standards. I mean, Jawan Taylor did with all his penalties he was acquiring and all, because the refs, this game was all about the refs saying, hey, we don't side with Kansas City. We are not biased in any sort of way. And yeah, no nonsense penalties except for that one controversial call that I hear people talked about in the first quarter. And the Chiefs defense seemed like they were selling their soul to stop Saquon Barkley, stop that run game. And they completely forgot to defend everything else. They completely forgot that A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, like you said, are a top wide receiver duo. Jalen Hurts, and they forgot that the offensive coordinator was Kellen Moore, who kind of lifted Dak Prescott to MVP level last year. Yeah, and Jalen Hurts was unbelievable. I'm totally fine with him getting that Super Bowl MVP. I think he delivered. Let's just say that he flat out delivered. This performance kind of reminded me a lot of a young Russell Wilson, with a strong running ability, okay passing that's still developing, and very young. And they're only 1 year apart in terms of age. And really, Jalen Hurts did make the Super Bowl when he was 24. He's 26 now. So yeah, I think they got it going. And both quarterbacks had a super good running back going into the game, probably best in the NFL. Speaking of best in the NFL, Mahomes has typically been regarded as the greatest quarterback of the 2020s. So how do you think the Super Bowl affects Mahomes' legacy, Max?
I think it doesn't affect his legacy too much in a negative way. I mean, going to the Super Bowl, obviously you want a Super Bowl win, but losing a Super Bowl is not as impactful as winning a Super Bowl is. You win a Super Bowl, you cement more your legacy. You're up in there in the ranks of Brady, Montana, Bradshaw in that department. You get four, you win four, MVPs all around. But when it comes to Mahomes, you're losing the Super Bowl. You've still been to three in a row. You still have won three by the time you're 27, right? And he's doing all this. And as we see him lose the Super Bowl, I think all that's doing is showing that it's going to be a tighter race than we think between him and Brady as Mahomes plays out his career. Right now, there was a lot of people saying, "Oh, if he gets his three-peat, if he gets four, he's 27. Do we call him the GOAT? Like, are we projecting?" But now that we've seen, we're in a similar situation to Brady. Brady didn't have the three-peat, but in this time frame, around so by 2007-ish, Brady had those three Super Bowls, and it was another 10 years before we saw another Brady Super Bowl. So we see another one coming up, we may be able to project, hey, Mahomes 4 or 5 by this point, go. But I think where we're standing at in kind of a Brady Mahomes legacy at this point, it's going to be a tighter race than we might think.
So I will agree with you on that one. Both Mahomes and Brady are 3-2 in their first 5 Super Bowls. I don't think people recognize that. And despite both losses being blowouts for Mahomes, do you really think Tom Brady faced a team as good as this Eagles team, like as stacked? Like you could make the argument the Falcons, but really all their big names were on offense. The defense just was fantastic in the first half and fell apart. And they had aggressive coaching. And you could also make the argument that the greatest show on turf was probably better than this Eagle team. Who knows? But the Patriots back then, when they won that first Super Bowl, they were completely defensive minded. Tom Brady didn't even have a receiver over 900 yards. And even though, yeah, at the time he did start only 14 games of that season, but they were just defensive minded, which I feel like it was easier to deal with in that Super Bowl. They could handle that Rams offense a lot better. And I don't understand why people are claiming a 29-year-old who has been to 5 Super Bowls, most ever before turning 30, has had his reputation and legacy completely tarnished. I mean, when it was everybody except Xavier Worthy that had given up early, most of his team failed him. And people claim that Mahomes was stat padding later on in the game, getting those big plays and touchdowns. But if you paid attention, the defense was still trying to stop them because before that game, Vic Fangio replayed that Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl from 2 years prior, and I heard it was so quiet in that locker room, you could hear a pin drop. That's how locked in that Eagles defense was. And so I don't think they wanted to give up any sort of touchdown. But what we saw at the end was Mahomes refusing to give up no matter how badly he was down. And that I think that just speaks to the type of competitor he is. Like all competitors, you have to rely on new teammates coming with you. So if that's the case, NFL draft, here we come. So, Max, I would like you to pull up your screen and show people our spreadsheet because we are about to start our first NFL mock draft. I will be choosing the evens. Max will be choosing the odds. First overall pick in the NFL draft goes to the Tennessee Titans. Dun, 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 dun.
Are you going to do the sound every time?
The Titans will select as the number 1 overall pick. Yes, you are.
All right. I'm going to go with Cam Ward,
Ca-
quarterback, University of Miami. So, I mean, I think we just the whole debate right now, Cam Ward versus Shedeur Sanders, right? That's the issue everyone's looking at when we look at the top of the draft. I think when it really comes down to it, you're looking at two very good prospects. I think the biggest issue for me is the comparison from Cam Ward to Shedeur Sanders in terms of a medium to deep pass range. We see two guys, both decently mobile, Shedeur a little bit more, but for as much as they kind of even out in accuracy, despite the fact Cam Ward's better, Shedeur Sanders struggles a lot when he goes over more than 25 yards. Cam Ward, accuracy's there, has a lot due to the amount of passes he's throwing, but when it comes down to it, Cam Ward is more spread out across the field, and he's efficient across the area of the field, which will be huge, especially going into Tennessee, where you may not have wide receivers who are able to get separation less than 25 yards. I mean, it's a rough room.
And an offensive line.
Exactly. He's got to start from pretty much the bottom. That's what happens when you're the first round pick. You start from the bottom, and I think that Cam Ward is going to be the better quarterback for that purpose. So it's up to you with Cleveland.
Awesome pick for the number 2 overall pick. I have Cleveland going Abdul Carter from Penn State. I think since Myles Garrett requested a trade and will likely go to a bigger and better team, I think they need to replenish that defensive end because that's part of their culture now. Their solid defense because they had Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett. They did have Jadeveon Clowney at one point, believe it or not. I think people forgot about that. But that defense was part of the reason they got lifted to the playoffs alongside Kevin Stefanski's brilliant play calling.
Yeah. And I mean, that's you made a good pick. It's a pretty chalk start so far. I think this is how we're going to see a lot of mock drafts start from now until late April, unless they're trying to get a little silly with it. But I love that pick that you made there for me because I was getting worried what I was going to do with New York and how I was going to break that down if there wasn't another quarterback available. But with that, it's an easy pick. Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback from Colorado. I talked about him a little bit ago. Really, the biggest issue is what can we do? And obviously, he'll learn. He'll go to the NFL. He'll get more. But now with New York, you're having another extra resource that the Tennessee Titans have, and that's Malik Neighbors. You know what I mean? You're still starting from the bottom, but you're going to have a little bit more help. And when it comes down to it, Shooter Sanders is going to be the quarterback who needs a little bit more help. So I think that's a perfect pick for the Giants.
I think New York also needs to do a good job at rebuilding their culture. They've recently become a poverty franchise despite having 4 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
But with the number 4 overall pick, I have New England going. Obviously, Mike Vrabel, defensive minded, great culture builder. I think New England made a great move getting him. I think you know who I'm going to pick here: Travis Hunter at cornerback.
Corner.
Going
Very interesting.
going to New England because I think at cornerback we saw players who switched from receiver to cornerback do particularly well. And particularly, I'm talking about Richard Sherman. I feel like he'd have that type of impact as a player. And if we really need be, if they're that bad of a team this year, I
Mm-hmm.
think if enough convincing happens, I think he could play both positions. I don't think he'd play wide receiver as well because he'd be so worn out from playing defense. But I do think he is a good lock down your number 1 type receiver. I think eventually in the future, if things go out, if they play out well, like I think they will, I think a lot of teams will avoid throwing to his side of the field entirely.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that's interesting because I think there is a kind of debate of where Travis Hunter will go. And this is my personal opinion. I think if he does end up in New England, he's going to play an offensive side of the ball. We see in New England right now that has Christian Gonzalez, one of the most underrated players in the NFL right now. Coming after an injured rookie season, Christian Gonzalez is taking off. He's a defensive star, some would say. So I think that's a room where Travis Hunter may play more on the offense, but knowing him, he can play either side. You know.
That is a very, very good point. And who's your number 5 overall pick for Jacksonville?
For Jacksonville, I mean, this is a team that's, man, it looks rough every year. They're going so many years with the top 10 pick, and they just really need help in every place they can get. It's rough for them these days. I think in the last, at least since Trent Baalke was hired, they've had 2 winning seasons, one of which was the 2017 team, which you can't beat that. But it's really tough for them. So I'm gonna help them out on the defense, help them get some defensive line in there, help put some pressure on the quarterback. I'm gonna go with Mason Graham, the defensive tackle from Michigan. Which again, this is kind of sorting out to be a pretty chalk mock draft right now, but I'm sure we'll get more into the fun picks as we get later on, past maybe the top 9, get some heavy hitters out of the way. But you're up at 6, Raiders.
At 6, I'm going to take Tataro McMillan from Arizona.
See if I can spell Tetaroa. Hold on, googling. But yeah, break it down for me, man.
So a lot of people are going at the Raiders for not having a good quarterback. I think they're going to make some more sort of massive move in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, after the Devontae Adams loss mid-season for them, I think they really need to rebuild that receiving core. They need someone to put alongside Brock Bowers, who, even though he's a tight end, I feel like he's more of a receiver than anything.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get that receiving core going, go after someone in free agency, like, I don't know, or try and get Trevor Lawrence. I made predictions of Trevor Lawrence going to the Rams, for goodness sakes.
Mm-hmm.
But like, go get a good quarterback who needs to redeem himself. I think that would be a solid start for the Raiders. And Pete Carroll's a head coach, defensive minded, at least some offensive talent. I think that could potentially be a playoff contending team right there.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Coming up at number 7 with the Jets. This is an interesting position for the Jets, especially now that you've taken Tedero McMillan, because Aaron Rodgers, we've now heard from reports, is leaving the Jets, which sucks for them. But Aaron Rodgers, he didn't do well with his tenure at the Jets. We saw what happened the first season, which was nothing, and this year we're picking at 7, so nothing worked. So one thing about this Jets team, quarterback. Second thing about him, this is a team that needs another wide receiver. I know you're thinking like, oh my goodness, you have Garrett Wilson, you have Devontae Adams. If Aaron Rodgers is leaving, I'd put some money down that Devontae Adams is leaving as well. Now you're left with Garrett Wilson. You know what I mean? Which is good. Former offensive rookie of the year. Still need more. Hopefully you're going to get a quarterback. Not right here. It's too rich for someone like Dylan Gabriel at this 7. So you're probably going to go for a vet. We'll see how that works out. But I think this is a spot where you'd want to pick a wide receiver if Travis Hunter and Tedero McMillan are still on the board. That being said, since they're not, I'm going to flip it over to the other side of the ball, get some defensive help. Going back into the Michigan well, I'm going to go Will Johnson, cornerback from Michigan.
I think it's a good pick you made there. I think Sauce Gardner on defense, like, the Jets have a good defensive culture. I wish they'd get something going on offense. They had the one good run they had in offense was Aaron Rodgers running out with that American flag.
Yeah.
And that being said, moving on to the number 8 overall pick for the Carolina Panthers, I'm gonna choose Josh Simmons. Josh Simmons from Ohio State, offensive tackle. I think Bryce Young is a great quarterback, despite what people say. And we really saw it toward the end of this year, but he needs some offensive line help. And who better than Ohio State?
Mhm.
Championship winners this year, undisputed out of all teams. I think he'll do a really good job there at protecting Bryce Young. I could maybe make the argument that they'd go for a receiver later on in the second round instead of the first, but that's my pick for the Carolina Panthers.
That's interesting for sure. I like the pick of Simmons because I feel like we're in a really good tackle class. You've got Armand Membu, you've got Kelvin Banks, not even to mention Josh Connerly, and I'm forgetting someone huge right now. Will Campbell, not even to mention LSU's Will Campbell. And so I like the pick of Simmons, kind of throwing it in there. I feel like that's going to be a fun pick as opposed to what we've got going on. We're kind of getting out of the chalk area. New Orleans Saints at 9. This is a team in desperate need of some D line, some edge help, and some interior help. It's a pretty bad look right there. So I am going to go looking at my board, seeing who's available. Um, Maybe a guy that's not as common at this point. Probably going to be more of a mid-teens range, but I'm going to go with Mike Green. He is the defensive end. Hold on, let me look it up because I don't know what college he went to. He went to Marshall. That is sick. But after looking at him, I think he's a really good help for the Saints in that part.
Interesting pick. Interesting pick. I really like it. I think the Saints have a lot of rebuilding to do because after Sean Payton left, I feel like that's when you saw the up and down. Last season, they had that fantastical 2-0 start where they averaged about
Fantastical. Sorry, I just like that word. That's a good word.
46 and a half points per game to start. They whooped the Cowboys and they whooped the Panthers in their first game. And then you saw them fall off. It was right after that Eagles game, conveniently, where the Eagles won 15-12
Mhm.
over the Saints. But yeah, I like that pick. So number
Yeah. And if that goes to show you how prepared for this I am, I've got the whole player profiles down. I just didn't check what college they went to. Hopefully, I won't have to do that again. I think I've got most of them down. I just didn't know Mike Green. All right,
so
10 Chicago, go ahead.
So for number 10 overall pick for Chicago, I think they will get Will Campbell. I
Will
know I've picked
Campbell.
two offensive linemen in a row, but Chicago, Caleb Williams had better passing stats in the latter half of the season than Jaden Daniels, as absurd as that sounds. But a lot of his losses were because he could not get help of the offensive line. And so if Chicago has any hope of winning in the future or being regarded as, still as a great franchise for football, they need to start drafting more offensive linemen.
For sure. For sure. That's huge. Going into 11, 49ers. What a disappointing year from the 49ers. I mean, let's be real. You're looking at a Super Bowl team last year who roster didn't change too much. We had some injuries here and there, but still, you ended up at 11 overall after that, which is truly just an awful turnaround. Um, I think this team needs some help at safety. We've seen Talanoa Hufanga really kind of blossom in that role, but we're also seeing a loss of DBs. It feels like almost consistently from the 49ers. You're losing guys. Shout out Sanford grad Jaquiski Tart. But I'm going to run with Georgia safety Malachi Starks in this position to help their defensive backs. Because truly, I mean, who's going to draft an offensive player to the 49ers with the current state they're in? You get these guys healthy. I mean, you're looking at the best offensive weapons in the league.
And they've got Robert Sala back at defensive coordinator. For those of you who
Exactly.
don't remember, a few like for 2 consecutive years, he had the NFL's best defense. But moving on to the number 12 overall pick, I think you're gonna guess who I'm gonna pick here. Dallas needs a running back. They cannot rely on passing to CeeDee Lamb the entire time. And Dak Prescott's frankly getting old. Who knows? We may see some wild, absurd quarterback pick here.
Should I just go ahead and pencil this one in before you even say it?
Ashton Jeanty.
There it is, yeah. See if I can spell it right.
At what he was able to do, people think he had like after that game against Penn State that he wasn't a good running back and it was mostly just his line. I don't think people remember, despite Oregon being regarded as a fraud this season, they put up a good fight against Oregon, and when they had good things going too, Ashton Jeanty was able to run through that defense. They only lost 37-34. And I think Ashton Jeanty had 183 rushing yards. So that was pretty impressive to me. Anyway, moving on to the number 13 overall pick.
Yeah. Number 13 overall pick, Miami Dolphins. This is a team, you know, we think they can do great things. We see them in the roster they have every year. Now we're going to lose a Dolphins Tyreek Hill. Did they work that out? I don't know, but it's possible. You got CTE Tagovailoa. It's truly something crazy. I think that's the biggest issue we're looking at is to his protection, offensive line there.
We could make a whole argument on this Miami Dolphins franchise for a
Yeah,
long time, but anyway, let's get to your pick, Max.
yeah. I mean, I'd say from a perspective, you need to protect Tua. I'd put some other guys on the offensive line. Tron Armstead is getting older. Austin Jackson, he's not too old, but he's not putting out the production that you could have in this world. So that's where I'm going to get Armand Membu, the offensive tackle from, see, I know most of the colleges. Missouri. I read all the reports.
I think that's a good pick. So next up, I have the Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts on defense, they're aging a lot. You're not seeing a lot of help there. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is my Bama bias coming in here. Jihad Campbell.
Yeah.
I think he did a good job this season. People are doing nothing but going after that defense, calling them terrible. But Jihad Campbell had a really good game against Georgia when it mattered, and he had really good games other than that. So I think he will be a good pick for the Colts as a team. He can function as an off-ball linebacker, and if you really need him to, he can rush the passer pretty dang well.
Absolutely. Good pick. Good pick. Atlanta, they they made a decision in last draft. Yeah, last draft that a lot of people looked at, like, why the heck are you doing this? But hey, it turned out pretty well. Michael Penix. They played the game the right way, and they ignored everybody else, and it came out good. So, but at the same time, when they did that, they lost out on a pick of an edge rusher that they've needed for a long time now. So with that, I'm going to go back to the well of edge rushers with Shamar Stewart, the defensive end from Texas A&M.
Interesting. I kind of like that pick
Yeah,
there.
above his teammate Nick Scordon as well.
All right.
I like Stewart better.
So now we're going to shift to the Arizona Cardinals. I'm going to have them pick James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee.
Good pick.
Tennessee had a really good defense this year. And Arizona earlier on this year, they were able to put up a good fight and almost beat Buffalo. They were able to whoop the crap out of the Rams. I feel like if they get a good defense and an actual good legit head coach, I feel like they would be a solid playoff contending team in the NFC West. We'll see how that plays out. That's such a wild card division right now. You have one team with the most stacked roster in the world who's Super Bowl contender one year and then falls off the next. And it's completely all over the place. But what do you think of that pick, Max?
I think it's a great pick, and you really kind of stole who I probably would have picked for the Bengals. But with that, I mean, the Bengals, you still got to kind of go back into that defensive line area. I think I've picked, what is it? Oh, maybe 2 defensive line right now. Okay, so I'm chilling. No, I picked 3 so far. Either way, it's really what the Bengals need help with right now. Trey Hendrickson is, a dog, but I mean, you got to put some more pressure than just one guy. I mean, you can just double team, triple team. So with that, I'm going to throw in Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, defensive tackle, straighten up the inside that hasn't truly been the same in a few years, back to where it once was.
Interesting. I think that's a pretty good pick. And so my next pick, we're going Seattle.
Mhm.
Seattle has a good culture being built. Last season they were 10-7. They were 9-8 the seasons before that, back to back. But Geno Smith is aging, so I really think they need quarterback help here. And Mike McDonald is their new coach, and he's a very defensive-minded coach. And if he wants to build anything like the cultures they've had in the past few years or what he had going on in Baltimore, I think I'm going to go ahead and say Jalen Milroe. Shocker pick.
Interesting. Wow.
I know,
what
but
a pick.
I typically wouldn't do it after the mistakes he's had, but I think he could maybe be switched over to running back if really need be.
Interesting.
Because I think if that's the case, if they decide to go him and switch him to running back, they could switch him to running back, maybe get Dylan Gabriel later on in the next few rounds, see where that goes. But I think a lot of Jalen Milroe's inadequacies can be worked out. They're mechanical issues, and that can be fixed in the NFL. What I really like about him is his explosive athleticism, his ability to threaten the defense on every play. He showed up when it really mattered against Georgia. I don't know what happened against Michigan. Maybe they just had his number this time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Mike McDonald's gonna want a rusher like Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson. Continue that trend in the NFL. So yeah, that's my shocker pick for today.
Yeah, that's fantastical, as you would say. Um, Going to number 19, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Um, we're looking at a team, and I think I've said that as my intro for every team we've talked about so far. But with the Buccaneers, I think the biggest thing that we need to fix here is regardless of whether or not they get rid of or keep Jamel Dean, I think it's defensive backs, and I think we can really bump that up with a guy who I'm surprised has fallen this far, but that's Jahdae Barron, the safety from Texas. Led the SEC in interceptions this year. Were you about to steal that from me?
I was.
Well, got to find something else for Denver because Jahdae Barron, you are a Buccaneer.
Okay, that completely caught me off guard. But I think my next pick, I think this is actually kind of easier. I'm gonna go ahead and pick Derek Harmon from Oregon for Denver.
Make sure I spell that right. Hold on.
So, for those of you who don't know, he had a great season this year with the Oregon defense, despite giving up 41 points to Ohio State. I forgot how many sacks he had this season entirely, but pairing him with Benito and Sertan on that Denver Broncos defense, and along with what they've got building there with Sean Payton, I think that would be really good for them. And to me, it seems like a Sean Payton move.
Yeah. That's big. Good pick. At 21, the Steelers. Um, Here, how about I strike you a deal? I'll let you pick for the Steelers,
And
you
you
give me
wanna-
the next pick. I'll let you take 21 if I can take 22 for my team, and then I'll
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So for the
Or
Steelers,
actually, how about this? How about take that?
no, I'll let you do it.
No, I'll take Pittsburgh, and then I'll take the Chargers, and you take the Chiefs. We'll just trade those two. I'll take 22, and you take 31.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
That makes
fair.
sense?
That's fair.
All right, I'll take 2 in a row, and then you'll take 2 in a row there. I guess no. That'll give me no. We both take 3 in a row. I'll take 3 in a row here, and then you'll take the last 3. That sound good?
That sounds good to me.
Amazing. Okay, for Pittsburgh, not going to set up the Chargers for any specific pick. I'm just going to go with what I think the Steelers would pick, and I think Benjamin Morris, in any case, would not fall this far. But I'm going to put him here because we're having a lot of injury concern with Benjamin Morris, right? This is the cornerback out of Notre Dame. Great national championship, but really we're looking at, can his hit be recovered in time? I think it will be, personally. I think it's not that big, and if he wasn't injured, he'd be higher than this. I'm going to go with Benjamin Morris, the corner from Notre Dame.
If I was at that pick, I would have picked Ime Udoka, but that's just me.
See, I see the wide receiver pick, but I'm a huge George Pickens fan. Big George Pickens guy. I think they can survive with George Pickens as their guy. Chargers, woo, my team. This is an interesting
Bias.
Yeah, there is some bias here. I'm gonna make a good pick for him. Looking at a team, I think when we get to the Chargers, if Ashton Genty's available, they're taking Ashton Genty. As a fan, I'll tell you that's happening. I mean, we all love J.K. Dobbins.
Genty's going to be a Cowboy.
This is Jim Harbaugh. He's going to run that football, and he wants a rookie that he can do that with for years to come, and Genty's that guy. Having stolen Genty, you have. I think we've got to look again at the offense, helping Justin Herbert, helping our receiving core, bringing this team to a championship. You know, you might say, oh, we want an edge rusher because everyone wants to get rid of Joey Bosa. But I think what we really need is some help on the receiving core. Ladd McConkey, stellar. After that, Josh Palmer's all right. I'm tired of Quentin Johnston. Will Dissly's fine. I mean, but I think with those 2 first wide receivers I mentioned, I keep hitting this mic with my hair. Those 2 first wide receivers that I mentioned, great. Going up to Will Dissly, love the guy, boot him. Let's put in Tyler Warren, who I'm 80% sure went to Penn State. I knew it. Tyler Warren, best tight end in the game. Penn State. You're an LA Charger. Get excited.
So next up, I believe I'm picking for Green Bay.
No, I'm Green Bay. You're Minnesota.
Oh.
Yeah. See, I just got so excited. I wrote Chargers. This is high school. All right. Green Bay. Here's what I'm thinking here. Let me look at my things. Okay. So I think we're moving on from an era of Jair Alexander. You know, that being said, there's also a debate here at wide receiver, and I want you to hear me out. Packers, great wide receiver core. You know what I mean? Christian Watson,
You're gonna
Romeo
pick
Dubes.
Matthew Golden, aren't you?
Just listen. Romeo Dubes, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed. Who's the other one that I'm forgetting? There's a fourth one. There's so many Packers receivers.
So am I. I forgot.
Exactly. There's so many of them. Here's the issue. None of them are number one receiver. Jaden Reed's the best. I think we'd say that, but he's not like the number one guy. You can only be so good with numbers. You need a guy who's really quality. So here's what I'm thinking, and I want you to help me out here because you haven't picked him too. Do I take Trey Amos, cornerback from Ole Miss, or do we go with everyone's favorite, Luther Burden, wide receiver, Missouri?
Trey Amos.
Amos? All right, let's lock it in. Trey Amos, corner, Ole Miss. Helping out that Green Bay defensive back room.
All right, so next up, I'm picking for Minnesota. I think the Vikings, we saw in the first round, that Lions defense, well, not Lions defense, it was the Rams. It was the Rams was kicking their butts. They won 27-9. I think Minnesota needs to go out and get Tyler Booker, give Sam Darnold a little bit more time, despite the interception proneness at the end of the season. I think he's still a great quarterback. If you forgot for a while, they were thinking that he would be better than Josh Allen. So I think he needs a better offensive line in Minnesota.
Keep going back to the Alabama well, huh?
It's not biased. In this case, it's a legit pick. Most of my picks are not trying to be biased, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to just flat out pick for the.
That's a good pick though, because I was thinking about going back to that offensive line well for the Texans. With the Texans at 25, I think there's two guys in between right now. One of them being Luther Burden, who we just talked about. I think I'm leaning away from that though because we know the Texans wide receiver core is pretty set. I think we can add some just because, we got guys who are aging. We got guys who are performing not what we expected them to do. But I think what we need to do here is help out an offensive line with a guy who can play inside or outside. I'm probably going to mark him down as inside because that's probably where I project him to play. But I think we run with Kelvin Banks, who I'm going to put down as the interior offensive lineman from Texas.
Interesting pick. So next up, the LA Rams. The Rams had a solid defense with Jared Verse this season. I'm going to go ahead and say they're going to go on offense and pick another receiver. I know how LA operates. I think they're going to pick Matthew Golden. And really, you could kind of see that coming. Matthew Golden did really good off of a bunch of screen passes. With Cooper Kupp moving on, too, they need to start replenishing that wide receiver core. And with Puka Nacua, who's a good slot receiver who can get out and do intermediate catches, you need some sort of really explosive threat.
Yeah, that's huge. Baltimore Ravens. I mean, how much more can you do to help this offense? Even with what you've got, Lamar Jackson is playing at an MVP level and bringing him to the top. I think you could probably help that out in the later rounds, especially with the quarterback that you have in Lamar. I think this is a place to pick some guys on defense. This is a really good trenches class. You're going offensive line, defensive line, almost every other pick right now. We're going on a really good run, and I think with that, I'm going to take Mykel Williams, the defensive lineman from Georgia.
Good pick. Georgia, as always, is a powerhouse SEC school known for developing defense. I believe it's my pick next.
Yes.
So next up, we saw what happened to Detroit. Their defense was no help at all. I know they didn't have Aiden Hutchinson there, played by injuries, but I do think, despite having Kirby Joseph leading the NFL in interceptions, and I believe Brian Branch on their side too, yep. I think elevating that defense is of the utmost importance still. Otherwise, I think they're this close away from winning a Super Bowl, and a few fourth downs, but I think they're going to go ahead and pick Shavon Revel Jr., cornerback from Eastern Carolina. He is 6'3". He is a good lockdown cornerback. We'll see how he does pressing other receivers against strong receivers, but I think it would be a good pick if they're aiming to boost their defense.
Yeah, that's for sure. I completely agree. Like you said, Brian Branch, absolute dog. That Detroit defense can only get better, man. I mean, that Detroit team can only get better. You see what they've done against Washington? They're not going to lose too much of that next year. I think we're looking again, like we said last year, at a potential Super Bowl team, which would be huge. Washington, we just finished the Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl. Great watch, great reps we saw from all these guys. We're looking at a guy who, for Washington in the spot, that some could say had the best Senior Bowl. And with that, I'm going to take Shamar Stewart, the defensive end from. I didn't care to look at his helmet.
Texas A&M.
Did I already pick him? I definitely already picked him.
Oh no.
Am I getting? Oh, I totally already picked him. I was so excited.
We're gonna cut this out. You're gonna have to say I'm gonna pick, and I'll be.
Oh yeah, all right. That was embarrassing. I totally already picked him. Oh, I was so excited.
Dude, when I cut this down, it's gonna be like 30 minutes.
It's fine. Okay, I'm just gonna take Jack Sawyer. Where did he go to school? Let me know ahead of time.
Ohio State.
Nostio hate. Whoa.
Nostio hate. I hate.
Okay, we're back. If you saw the cut, it's because I picked a guy I already picked. Maybe you'll see it in the bonus footage. I don't know. But with the Commanders, I still think we need to go on that defensive line, help them out in that area. I mean, it's a wonder what they did this season getting to the conference championship. Props to Washington. I think a lot of that is, on Jaden Daniels, Rookie of the Year, and the ability of what he's able to do with the offense he's given. I think if we can help his defense, we can get him to even higher places. We saw the mistakes the D-line made in the conference championship game, almost giving away points, but you have to stop the tush push somehow. And for that, I'm going to give him Jack Sawyer, the defensive end from Ohio State.
That is a good pick. I don't know if you recall, he was the guy who forced the fumble on Quinn Ewers. He was Quinn Ewers' roommate at Ohio State, forced the fumble out of him against Texas and was able to score that touchdown. But with next overall pick, Buffalo.
You got the last three. You got all three of these picks.
I know.
It's all yours.
Buffalo. Man, wide receiver help is a must, especially after those drops in the first two drives against Kansas City. I'm going to go ahead and say they get Isaiah Bond.
Isaiah Bond. Wow.
He's one of the best receivers remaining, in my opinion. That would make 2 times I've picked a Texas receiver in the first round. And that would be...
I definitely didn't write Alabama because I
forgot. I think Texas, this is going to be back-to-back years. They have a first-round wide receiver pick. So, yeah, that's what I think with them. Next up with Kansas City. As all of you know, they had a poor offensive line performance in the Super Bowl. That is a must-need. But I feel like a lot of that can be dealt with in the free agency. With that said, there is a chance that Travis Kelce retires. And if he does, I love Noah Gray, but I don't think he's as good as Kelce was. I think Kansas City needs to go out and draft Colston Loveland, tight end from Michigan.
Good pick.
I think he's a fast, phenomenal tight end for who he is, and I'm very surprised he wasn't produced at Iowa.
All right, you ready for the Eagles pick?
Kenneth Grant from Michigan. I don't really see what Philly could do to improve their offense, and their defense did show up and show out in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So, edge, right?
Yeah, well, no, he's a D tackle.
D tackle? Okay, I couldn't remember.
And they have 3 Georgia D linemen, but just add another one to the mix from Michigan. I think that'll make a defensive beast. They're already by far and away the best team in the NFL.
Yeah.
So there's not really much they can do to improve except just get backups at this point.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, we completed a mock draft. That was pretty cool. That was pretty fun. Just to go
for a second, yeah, I would just like you to go over the picks. Go ahead and list them off.
First pick, Tennessee Titans, Cam Ward, quarterback, Miami. For Cleveland, at 2, we took Abdul Carter, the edge from Penn State. The Giants took Colorado quarterback Shadur Sanders. Going back to Colorado, we took the corner Travis Hunter for New England. Jacksonville Jaguars bolster up their defensive line with Michigan defensive tackle Mason Graham. Las Vegas Raiders get a better wide receiver with Arizona wide receiver Tedroa McMillan. The Jets help out their defense with Will Johnson, corner from Michigan. Carolina helps out their offensive line protecting the little Bryce Young with Josh Simmons, offensive tackle Ohio State. New Orleans get the edge, Mike Green from Marshall. Chicago gets Will Campbell from LSU, offensive tackle. San Francisco gets Malachi Starks, the star Georgia safety. Dallas getting who many consider the best player in the draft. Ashton Jeanty should have won the Heisman, running back, Boise State. Miami, Armand Membu, the offensive tackle from Missouri. What a dog. Are we picking this up? I don't know. Indianapolis. Charlie's first Alabama pick, Jahad Campbell, linebacker. Atlanta getting Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher they've always needed from Texas A&M. Arizona getting James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. What a star. Cincinnati, defensive line from Ole Miss, Walter Nolan. Seattle, crazy pick of the draft, Jalen Miller, quarterback, Alabama. Tampa Bay getting Jahdae Barron, the safety from Texas, led the SEC in interceptions. Denver, Derek Harmon, defensive line from Oregon. Pittsburgh, Benjamin Morris, cornerback, Notre Dame. LA Chargers, bolt up, baby. Tyler Warren, tight end, Penn State. Green Bay, Trey Amos, cornerback, Ole Miss. Minnesota, Tyler Booker, offensive tackle, Alabama, also Charlie's pick. Houston, Matthew Golden, wide receiver. Nope, sorry, I skipped one. Houston, Kelvin Banks, inside offensive lineman, Texas. Rams, Matthew Golden, wide receiver, also Texas. Baltimore, Michael Williams, defensive line from Georgia. Detroit getting Siobhan Ravel, the star cornerback from Eastern Carolina. Washington getting Jack Sawyer at 29, the edge from Ohio State. Buffalo getting another wide receiver like they should have last year in the first round. Instead of letting Xavier Worthy walk, but they got Isaiah Bond, this time wide receiver from Texas. And then back-to-back Michigan stars, Kansas City Chiefs tight end Coastal Loveland, and Philadelphia defensive lineman Kenneth Grant.
And that will be all. Thank you for joining us as we picked our first NFL mock draft pre-combine. May we remind you, we will do one post-combine and then one the day before the draft. So thank you for tuning in. Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in from the Cheap Seats. As always, I'm your host, Charlie Jimenez. If you like this video, go subscribe for more content. And if you want to get more information about when our videos are coming out, go check out our Instagram page for more.